I think it's important that we take a moment this week to bow our heads in respect for the death of Joy Reid's show on MSNBC. Joy Reid has been a gift to conservatives for years, often voicing the most easily mockable nonsense found anywhere in the corporate media. From her lies about her homophobic blog posts to her demonization of white people and Trump supporters, she represented the id of the Democratic Party. The part that reasonable Democrats try and pretend doesn't exist, and then they have to massage their temples when she says the quiet part out loud. With her firing, we lost some crucial insight into the more radical, nonsensical left wing of the party, and that truly is a shame. I'm concerned that if MSNBC keeps on firing all their hosts with low ratings, there won't be anyone left to make fun of. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We should have a pretty fun show for you this week. We have our big three topics that we're going to talk about. We are going to be rejoicing in the schadenfreude that is Joy Reid being fired from her job. She's terrible. And then we'll talk about the stock market a little bit, some of my concerns about the upcoming economic troubles that I see. And we are going to talk about the Associated Press suing the president. But first, let's go to our favorite comment from last week. Our friend Kevin said, quote, "Great explanation of how the actual mechanics of DEI initiatives play out," end quote. So I said this in the comments, but I'll say it to everybody else here if you didn't read them. I often say that it is really difficult to link bad policy with real-world outcomes because life is messy. There's a lot of things that are going to play out, a lot of factors that are going to determine how things work in life. But sometimes it is really easy to draw a line from A to B, from bad policy to bad outcomes. In the case we were talking about last week of air traffic controllers, it is pretty clear that there is a cause and effect that we went over. And you might say there are obviously going to be other factors at play, but it is very clear to say this led to less qualified people being in control. Here's how we can demonstrate that. Here's exactly the numbers of people we didn't hire. Here's when we changed the thing. Here's the people we've hired now. You can draw this line, and it is very simple to make an A-B argument in this case. And sometimes things are like that. Bad policy is often disguisable because of all of the things that come into play and all the things you can and cannot take into account. It's very easy to lie with data a lot of the time because you can do that. There's something called, getting off on a tangent here, but there's something called the Simpson paradox or Simpson's paradox. And basically, it'll say that you have a piece of data, you have some measurement that you're using, and you say, well, look at this. This shows that A is greater than B. But then if you link it to other data in the same series, what you find out is that even though A looks like it's bigger than B in almost all the cases, actually B is bigger than A because when you combine the data trends, it actually switches the trend. And so it's called Simpson's paradox. It's this idea. That's how you lie with data in the real world. And people do that all the time to disguise bad policy. In this case, pretty clear. Thanks for the comment. I'm glad that you liked how we draw the line because it's pretty, like I said, it's pretty obvious to me what the issue is, at least in that one topic. Now, let's move on to our first topic of the week. Let's talk about Joy Reid being fired. Just take a moment. Like I said in the intro, we're going to bow our heads. Take a moment. We mourn the loss of the readout on MSNBC because it gave us some great laughs over the years. She's an idiot. There's not a nice word I can say about this person. You know what? Actually, I can't say one nice word. Part of her book that she wrote, what was it? I don't remember what the actual title of it is. She wrote a book in the last couple of years. I read part of it. It's okay. It's not a bad book. That's about the only nice thing I can say about her. I do not think she's very bright. I don't think she was a good host. I don't find her charismatic. There's nothing that appeals to me about Joy Reid. And I think she's a bad person. I think she is a liar. I think she's a racist. So when she gets fired, I'm going to take a little joy in it. I know it is not a good trait. It's not a good personality trait to take enjoyment in other people's suffering. But sometimes people are bad. She's a bad person. I really do think that. It's not because she's a Democrat. It's not because she's a liberal. It has nothing to do with that. There are 70 million Democrats walking around the USA right now. Most of them are great. The overwhelming majority of people are great in general. I really think that. But she's one of the people who foments this disgusting racial, political rhetoric that I just can't stand. I do not think she's a good person. I don't think she's a good thing. And I'm glad that she's been fired. I don't like her. And we can talk about some of the reasons why. I think it's funny. Remember, this is years ago now, and it's people have forgotten about it. It came out, so she got this show in 2020, 2018, something like that. It's been 4 or 5 years, or possibly 5 or 6 years. But she got this show, and it became this little scandal because, it turns out Joy Reid, when somebody went back through, she had this old blog from over a decade and a half ago that she had written all these really homophobic things, making fun of people for being gay, talking about how gay people were bad, blah, blah, blah. It was just really homophobic stuff. And her defense at first was that her website had been hacked. She would never have said these things. She would never have said such homophobic rhetoric, and she always loved the gays and blah, blah, blah. She's a liar. She then came out and said, all right, well, maybe I did. People change their mind, whatever. Fine. I'm willing to accept that. This has always been, again, I think of myself more as a conservative these days, but this has always been a thing. I was pro-gay marriage or pro-legalization of civil unions before the Democrats, okay? My whole life, I have been on that side of this issue. It's just my personal belief. I have nothing wrong with two gay people. If they find a church that says they can be married or if they want to do a civil union, I find no issues with this whatsoever. So I have been on that side of this issue before the Democratic Party, before people like Joy Reid, who are now on the left wing, were pro-gay marriage and used to just mock gay people for being gay and then lie about it. Like, that to me, there are a lot of people who have changed their mind on this subject. I don't think you're a bad person, by the way, if you're anti-gay marriage. I don't think that at all. I think there's there's good religious argument that marriage is a union between a man and a woman. I think you can make that. I think you can be a good person and make that argument. I don't see any moral qualms with that because it's how you treat people in the world that matters. It's not, you say, again, my religion, if you're part of a church that won't marry two men or two women, I don't see an issue with that as long as you treat people with dignity and respect in the world. And you can do that and also say no to people. That's a possible thing. So I'm not saying she's a bad person for this. I'm saying she's a bad person because she's a liar, because she wrote a bunch of homophobic things. And rather than be honest and truthful about it, she tried to pretend her website got hacked and that she didn't say all this stuff and that someone was out there to frame her. And then only after everyone said, that's ridiculous. Who would go back through your blog from 15 years ago and then write articles? Like, she wrote whole articles making fun of people and insinuating that other politicians were gay or things like that. So just really gross stuff. And so I think that's ridiculous. Her mockery of white women tears and saying that she finds some amount of joy in white women in crying because that's how they manipulate people. They use their white woman tears to manipulate and get out of trouble and lambasting the Karens and all this stuff. She's the worst kind of person. Like I said, I couldn't imagine saying something about black women, that just a blanket statement about black women, whatever it is. Like, I don't care about black women's tears. Like, could you imagine a person who would say something like that? That's a terrible thing to say. But when you say it about white women, it's fine. Oh, Joy Reid takes joy in white women crying. Like, that's a sick, weird thing to say for a person who's supposed to be empathetic and caring. And remember, the left, they're all about empathy and caring, except when it comes to white people and Christians. Like, that, they don't really care about that. But it's just like stuff like that. I don't like her. I think her show didn't do anything important in the 5 or 6 years that it's been on. I think that no one's going to miss her when she's gone. I think even her fan won't be sad. If her mom watches the show, she's not going to care. I did think it was funny. MSNBC. So we're going to talk. Actually, I have the numbers in here. We'll talk about it in just a second. Before we get to the numbers, the biggest star on MSNBC, without it, there's no competition. It is someone's running away. This is Usain Bolt in the 100-meter dash with a 50-meter head start. Okay, that's how far apart Rachel Maddow is from everyone else on the network. She is the star of MSNBC. She went on after Joy Reid's show was canceled and basically called the network racist. She said, I don't support this. This is terrible. Here's the actual quote. She said, this is a quote, "It is also unnerving to see that on a network where we have two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekends," end quote. She said some other stuff here, basically insinuating that the network is doing something racial. She said it makes her uncomfortable. It's unnerving for them to fire this. To have your biggest star on the network go on her biggest show and then call you racist as a network where you platform her is just hilarious to me. It is high comedy. I always say this about the left wing. They have a tendency to eat their own. People who you might, 99% of the issues, you might wind up on the left side of the aisle. But if you ever stray outside that bound, that 1% goes the other way, or you say one thing, they will eat you and spit you out as nothing. Because this is what the left does. Remember, any country that you can think of that went communist, and you look at the leadership of that country, you know what you find? A lot of people who just get assassinated and murdered or imprisoned, because once you are no longer useful to the party, you're in the gulag or you're in the grave. That's the way it works. Look at, for example, there is a really famous photo. Oh, I should pull it up. There's a really famous photo of Stalin, and he's at this table. And in the photo, the original photo, there are 5 or 6 people around the table with him, and it was the old guard. These were the guys. These were the thought leaders of Soviet communism. And then slowly he killed all of them. So they all died. And so this was like the first kind of Photoshop stuff going on, because they would take the picture and then they would basically scrub the guy out of the picture. You know what? We got to pull it up. We got to pull it up since we're talking about it. And they would scrub the guy out of the picture, and eventually Stalin was the only person left. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Let's see if we can't find the photo I'm talking about. Well, this is not the one. Actually, oh, here it is. Here's a great one. Okay, so we'll pull this up real quick. Let me see what we can do. Sorry, I should have had this pulled up. I didn't know I was going to talk about it, but it's kind of funny. So we move to this. We move to this. Got to mess with my camera here, blah, blah, blah. All right, so this is the photo I'm talking about. Look at this thing. So we have this picture. This is the original picture right here. What you'll see is Stalin. I can't remember who all of these people are in the photo. But then this guy gets killed. So they redo the photo kind of like as a picture. And so then it's these 3. And then they kill this guy. And then it's just those 2. And eventually it's just Stalin, because all these people die. Because this is what happens in the left. They eat their own. So Rachel Maddow is willing to take the most left-wing show, or the most left-wing cable company, and then throw them under the bus, smear them as racist because they fired Joy Reid. I just find that hilarious. It's crazy to me. And then this woman's going to collect whatever it is, $30 million a year for her show. And Joy Reid, by the way, Joy Reid did not lose her job because of race. MSNBC is in a spiral. And here are the numbers I was talking about. So viewership on that channel as a whole is down 65% since the election. Here are some numbers from them. 45,000 viewers during the day, 63,000 viewers at peak nighttime hours. That is abysmal for a major network. This is a major cable station pulling 63,000 people in prime time. That is not good. If you know anything about the numbers, that is bad. Those are bad numbers. The only person who actually pulls numbers on there is Rachel Maddow. And I saw some things that says she still does. She might pull over 1 million viewers. But she only has come back on a temporary basis for 100 days following the Trump presidency. And then she just goes back to one night a week. So they have no one at that network who can anchor, who pulls people in to watch. These numbers are, like I said, they are abysmal. They are terrible. And they're trying to do something different. And so Rachel Maddow can smear them as racist for firing Joy Reid, but Joy Reid didn't have viewers. There's no one who cares about Joy Reid. That's just the way it is. It's like, this isn't The View. The View pulls a bunch of people in, and they get numbers. This isn't Tucker Carlson when he was on. Tucker Carlson would pull numbers. Rachel Maddow pulls numbers. There's a reason, like, why Rachel Maddow has the spot she does and why she pulls big numbers, because you might not like Rachel Maddow if you watch this show. I get that. But Rachel Maddow, she has a thing that she does, and she does it really well. She's pretty decent at that show, like what she wants, what her audience wants. She might not agree with what she says, but she's good at the show. She knows how to put the show together and make a good show. And Joy Reid doesn't. Joy Reid does not pull numbers. It has nothing to do with her being a black woman. It has nothing to do with oppression or racism. It has to do with the fact that she can't pull more than 60,000 viewers a day. And when you're on a major cable channel, those numbers don't perform. That just is not going to cut it. So anyway, she's fired. Bon voyage. She'll probably wind up in some sort of Democratic position. You know, she might be the next leader of the DNC for all we know, because that's the way it works. It's just a constant cycle of people from the cable news networks to politics. It's gross. It's gross to me. Jen Psaki is going to get a Joy Reid spot on the show. Remember when she was the press secretary for Joe Biden, and how we're supposed to believe that now Jen Psaki is going to get, she's going to be unbiased in her coverage? No one who works on these shows is unbiased at all. It's just ridiculous. And they pretend to be, and that is annoying too. You know, I don't know if Joy Reid did, but the people who pretend to be objective journalists. No, you're not. You're partisan hacks. All of you are. And I don't begrudge. I am. I'm not. There's no way that I am unbiased. I have opinions. That's what this whole show is. My thing is, when Anderson Cooper gets up there and pretends to be objective, straight down the middle, this is CNN, we tell both sides of the story. No, we don't. You've never voted for a Republican in your life. You know, you're a gay dude in his 50s or 60s, and it's like, that's fine. I don't care that you're a Democrat. I just care that you lie about, like, what you're going to do. Say, I don't like Donald Trump, and this show's going to get him. And it's like, that's fine. If that's what you want to do, I don't care. But don't sit there and pretend. CNN pretends to be objective. No, they're not. MSNBC wants to pretend that they're objective. No, they're not. They lie about things all the time. Remember when Joe Biden had cognitive decline and they went, oh, he's fine. He's as sharp as a tack. They'd have guys on there who'd be like, he's playing chess in the Washington Park and beating all the hustlers. No, he's not. He was bad. Anyway, bon voyage, Joy Reid. Let's move on. The stock market. Topic number 2, the stock market. I don't want to bum out the conservative high that we got going here. Donald Trump wins the election. He wins the popular vote. He's getting all his cabinet people through the Senate confirmation hearings. He's signing executive action after executive action, orders and memorandums, and he started Doge, and he's got the richest man in the world going in there and saying you're fired to all these people in the government, and the conservatives are just clapping. We're sitting around, we're going, oh my God, he's doing it. He's winning. This is crazy. It's so great. I don't want to bring that down. Excuse me. I don't want to bring that down. But I feel like, unfortunately, I have to, a little bit. I am concerned. Donald Trump inherited a bad economy. It doesn't seem that way at the moment. People are worried about inflation. They're talking about the price of eggs. I get that. That is concerning. But this economy, we are on the cusp of something that is terrible. And it's been building for years. It's been building for about 5 years since the pandemic. It started when that last year in Donald Trump's presidency. And that wasn't his fault. That was the pandemic, and everyone did things wrong. But then Joe Biden blew it open with his terrible policies that for the past 5 years have really wreaked havoc on America. And we look at the stock market and we say, look, it's booming. The Dow's going up. Everything's great. The stock market keeps rising. And we say, yeah, that's fine, except it's not. And I'll tell you why. Because the stock market itself is out of whack. Now, when I was in college, I took some classes on economics. It's always been something that interests me. And I've read I've read Friedrich Hayek. I've read Thomas Sowell. The economics is something that I'm not an expert. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert, but I know a little bit about it. And the little bit that I know about economics, I see some things out there that, again, they're really troubling. And we have a couple of threats right now. We basically have three big things that could make this economy suffer, and I worry about that. The first one's obviously inflation. Inflation has been a problem. We have a target rate of inflation in the country of 2%, which means that year on end, prices are expected to rise 2%. The value of the dollar is expected to decrease by 2% a year. I don't necessarily agree that's a good goal, but it's fine. It's a sustainable goal it's doable. The problem is that we had 40-year highs in inflation under Joe Biden's presidency. The government spent too much money. That's just the way it is. We printed too much money. We spent too much money. We did a bunch of stupid shit we shouldn't have been doing. And there's not a nice way to say it. It made me mad at the time, and it makes me very angry now because I see what's coming. Inflation at times was hitting 9%, 9%. By the end of Joe Biden's presidency, it was down to 3%. This first month of Donald Trump's presidency, it hovered around 3%. So we say, it's fine. Inflation's at 3%. It's good. Except it's not good because 3% is 50% higher than what we want it to be, which is 2%. And it's not 3%. It's not like we went back 5 years and our prices rose 3%. No, prices rose 8, 9%, then 3%, then 4%, then 3%. We are up significantly. Don't look at the price of eggs. There's a different reason why the price of eggs are up. But look at the price of everything else in the world right now. It is more expensive, a lot more expensive. Inflation is an issue. And because it's still rising at 3%, it means that there's a problem in the economy that needs to be addressed. Now, what's my solution to this? The inflation problem? You're not going to like it because it's been the same solution for years. How do you get inflation? We've gone over this before, but I'll explain it again very simply. Inflation is caused by one thing and one thing only, government spending. The government prints money and it causes inflation. It's the only thing. Whatever else you hear people say, it doesn't matter. The only thing that causes inflation is the government prints too much money, and you wind up with too much money chasing too few goods and services. That's the only thing that causes inflation. And so when you have all of this money and not enough stuff, you get inflation. And so the government just printed money, just printed money during the pandemic, and now we have this inflation. How do you fix that? One, you have to curb government spending. That has been on everyone's bucket list for a long time. We have to cut government spending. But two, when you already have inflation, the only way you can fix it is you have to cool the economy, which means you are going to get a bump like a recession, and it's going to be necessary. It's going to be a reset. Joe Biden didn't want to risk his presidency. What he should have done when they hit these inflationary spirals is tell the Fed, we need to move. We need to crush inflation before it gets out of control. They should have raised the interest rates like crazy and halted the economy. Everyone would have taken a hit. It would have been bad for the economy. It would have bumped down. We would have gone into a recession. But we could have reset the clock on inflation, and now we could be building again. Instead, what we've done is just allow inflation to go on now for 5 years, and we haven't fixed it, which means we still have to have a harder reset than we want, which means there's going to be a bump in the economy. The only way Donald Trump fixes this problem is by raising the interest rates. Now, again, the Fed raises interest rates. Donald Trump can raise interest rates. He talks to the Fed. The Fed will raise interest rates. They coordinate. It's just the way it is. And no one's going to like that. It's going to mean there's going to be a bump in the stock market. It's going to be a bump in the economy, and it's going to be harder for people to make money. But that needs to happen. If we don't fix inflation is only one of the problems, by the way. The other problem, and this is another indicator that there is a big problem, is your price earnings ratio in the stock market. So we're getting a little technical here, but basically you have this rating on the stock market, which is how you judge the health of a company and how you judge the health of the stock market as a whole. It's called your PE ratio, your price earnings index. Basically, you take a company's stock price. So imagine for example, you have a company and they're selling at $30 a share. You take $30 a share, you put it on top. Then you divide that by the company's earnings per share over the course of 12 months. So imagine you buy a stock for $30, and over the course of 12 months, the amount of earnings in that company per share, it winds up being $3, just to make the math easy for me. So you divide the share stock price by the earnings per share, and you wind up with this PE ratio, which in that case, it would be 10. 10's fine-ish. It's a little low, but just to make it easy. So basically what you're looking for, when you're looking for a healthy company, and you're looking for a healthy stock market, is a number around 20. So really 15 to 20 seems to be a good-ish ratio for the PE earnings ratio. Last week, we hit 30. It was 29. We hit 29 on the PE ratio in the stock market as a whole. Right now, it's February 28th. Yesterday, February 27th, the PE ratio for the U.S. stock market was 25.78. It's too high. And so let's give some examples here. So for example, in 2008, it went up to 122 because when the bubble burst, that's what happened. Same thing in the dot-com. When the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, it was in the 30s or 40s or something. When it gets up there too high, what does that mean? It means that the company, the value of the stock, does not reflect the actual monetary earnings of the company, which means you're paying too much for the stock, which means the company is actually overvalued. And when the company is overvalued and you're buying these stocks high, you wind up losing money eventually because that company is going to have a reset. The stock prices are going to fall and people are going to lose money. So when the entire U.S. economy is looking at a price earnings ratio of 25 to 30, it's getting a little scary. When it was 29 last week, you say that's not good because what it means is you're overpaying for the stocks. The stocks are too high. So right now we're on an upswing. We're buying high, which means that there's going to be a downturn when there's a reset and there's a realignment and the companies start to reflect their actual value. The prices of all these stocks are going to drop. So that's concerning. And again, that is because, why is that? It's because we have too much money in the economy. And we have too much money, which means everything costs more, which means that we're paying more for stocks in these companies that then don't reflect their value on how much money they actually make because the stock prices are just artificially being boosted by too much money in the economy. So that we're looking at a possible hard reset there or a realignment there that reflects actual value in the economy. That's a big deal. And the third prong of this troublesome economy is tariffs. I have made it very clear. I'm not anti-tariff in general. Let me rephrase that. I think in general I am, but I see the utility in them in certain cases. One, trying to get other countries to come into alignment with the U.S. vision, what we need. And two, for protectionist ideas, I'm a little in favor of tariffs. For example, if China is going to put tariffs on U.S. goods simply for coming from the U.S. to protect our own industry, I don't see why we couldn't do that the opposite way around because our economy is so big, we import from everywhere in the world. Like, we can do whatever we want. If one country is being unfair to the U.S., it's fine for us to go back and forth with them because we have manufacturing all over the world. We do not need one country in particular to supply us with things. So I'm not anti-tariffs. The problem becomes when you're having economic problems, which the U.S. is, even though they're kind of disguised right now, when you're having economic problems, if you are then putting tariffs into the mix and raising the price of goods, you once again run into this problem. Tariffs in the short term hurt the economy. In the long term, they can fix some problems, but in the short term, they hurt the economy. So Trump wanting to go in here and put tariffs on everything, in the short term, could lead to some economic problems. Now, the problem is if we go into the short term with economic problems and we have this inflationary problem and we have a reset on the PE ratio that needs to happen, a realignment of those values, then we're looking at it's not going to be like 2008. I don't believe it's going to be that bad, but we're looking at a serious kind of recession that we could be hitting. We probably should have had one, and I'm not rooting for a recession, but there probably should have been one under Joe Biden's presidency to, again, realign the actual value of things in this country as opposed to just artificially boosting everything, which is what happened. So I'm worried. I think that we're looking at the verge of a crash, and I think that's a scary thing. This will be bad, and it would be terrible for Republicans if this happens. If there's a crash in the economy, it is going to be blamed on Donald Trump 100%. And it's really not his fault, because this is all set up. This is all set up going forward, and I don't know how you get out of it. It's possible. Maybe there's some sort of soft landing that can happen. I am skeptical, and I am a little worried about this. I don't give advice. I'm not going to give advice here on what you should be doing with your money, but it might be a good time to play it a little conservative in the stock market. That's all I'm going to say. That's it. That's the only advice I'm going to give. But anyway, and if he gets blamed, this is going to be bad for Republicans in the midterm, and especially bad for them on the next presidential cycle. Because here's been a tricky thing that's happened, is that Republicans come in office and bad things happen to the economy, because when Democrats get in office, they spend too much money, they do too many things, and then they leave the economy on this bubble, and then the Republicans get in, the bubble pops, the Republicans get blamed. That's kind of the way it goes. It's like George Bush, the second George Bush, he was a little bit of an exception to that, but that was because there was a terrorist attack and there was a war that played some games with his, and he also came into office when the dot-com bubble burst. So again, he inherited this. Then the next year, there's a terrorist attack, and we wind up in a war. The economy took a giant hit. Not really his fault. But Obama did not do a good job recovering the economy in 2008. Donald Trump came in office. He had an okay economy. He did a great job for 3 years building that economy. It was fantastic. COVID happened. The world goes to shit. Joe Biden then, for the next 4 years, proceeds to mess up the economy worse than any president in my lifetime. And now Donald Trump is coming in office. He's been in office 1 month, and I'm looking down at what's coming, and I'm saying, you can't blame him for this. There's not a lot he's doing that's going to contribute to this. The soft landing, if it was going to happen, should have happened 3 or 4 years ago, and we're not going to get there. So anyway, a little worried. Anyway, oh my gosh, 31 minutes. What are we doing here? I'm talking too much. I'm going to briefly just go over this third topic. The AP, the Associated Press, has been banned from the White House, and people they're aghast. Oh, I can't believe it. What an infringement on the First Amendment and free speech and blah, blah, blah. Let's go over a little background here. Why did the White House ban the AP from the White House press briefings and Air Force One? It's because Donald Trump signed an executive order. He changed the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. It's the Gulf of America now. This is the way it is. Deal with it. It's ours now, Mexico. We took it. So the Gulf of America is what the White House says because Donald Trump made it American law. He said, this is what's happening. It's now the Gulf of America. The Associated Press has said, we're not changing it. They write the style guide for journalists. They said, we're not changing it. It's going to stay the Gulf of Mexico. So the White House revoked their access to the press pool and aboard Air Force One. The AP has now sued the White House. And I have a lot of thoughts on this. The judge, by the way, in this first bit of the lawsuit, there was a federal judge that they went before. He did not lift the injunction. He said, no, this can go to trial. We'll see what happens. But you don't just get to go in to these things because you're saying you deserve it. Is this a violation of free speech or freedom of the press in America? It might be a controversial take. No. No, it is not. Tyler, anyone who watches this show knows, I've said it a billion times, I am a free speech absolutist. There is not a lot of things I do not believe you should be allowed to say in this country. It's slander and libel. You're not allowed to lie about people to damage their reputation. And you can't make immediate threats against people. Other than that, I can't really think of anything you're not allowed to say in a country. I'm not allowed to threaten people. I'm not allowed to slander, libel people. That's basically it. There's some other ones, I guess. Obscenity can, depending on how it's classified, is also free speech. So, like, for example, child pornography. It's not freedom of speech. It does not pass the Miller test. It's obscene. It doesn't get it's not protected. But like there's exceptions like that. But things that people say in general, like when you talk about hate speech, nope, sorry, it's protected by the First Amendment. Most things are. So this is not an infringement on the First Amendment because, and here's why this is not an infringement, because you do not have a right to be in the White House briefing room. You don't have a right to be on Air Force One as a news organization. You don't have that right. It's a privilege. It's a privilege granted. The White House doesn't have to grant it to anybody. They do grant it to people because the president wants to be accountable to the press. But you don't get, like, for example, you could say this show deals with politics. I don't get to just go put on a press pass and walk into the White House briefing room. I don't get to go on Air Force One because I call myself the press. The AP is obviously bigger than me, right? They have a lot of readers, a lot of people count on them, but you don't have a right as a news organization to just follow the president around everywhere he goes. You don't have that right. I don't see how no one's saying you can't publish. That would be an infringement on your rights. You can write whatever you want. You can call it the Gulf of Mexico. You can put it on your website. You can make TV shows about it. You can do a podcast. Donald Trump didn't say you can't do it. He just said, you're not allowed to, you don't get to be my friend. That's basically what he said. And I don't see any infringement in that. I'd be surprised if the Trump administration loses the lawsuit because no one's saying you don't have access to all the same information anyone like myself does. There are going to be people there. They report on the president. I read that. I take that and I make a show. The AP can do the exact same thing. You do not have a right just because you are a big news outlet. What the heck are you doing back there, Cap? You don't have a right to the president. You just don't. So I think that it's fine. I don't think it's a big infringement on the First Amendment. And again, you know me if you watch the show. That's my bugaboo issue, the First Amendment and freedom of speech and being able to say what you believe, not being compelled. I don't believe in compelled speech. I don't think Donald Trump should be able to tell the Associated Press they have to use the Gulf of America or you're not allowed to publish. You can't do that. You can say you have to use the Gulf of America if you want to be around me because I don't need news outlets that are just anti-Donald Trump in the White House briefing room. I don't see any problem with that. I really don't. Joe Biden didn't do an unfriendly interview in the 4 years he was president. And you look at the amount of questions that presidents take. I saw something that said, I think in the first month as president, Barack Obama did 160 questions from the press. Joe Biden did 140. And Donald Trump has done over 1,000. Donald Trump gives more access to the president the press more access to the president than any president in history. He takes more questions from the press. You're not going to tell me that he's limiting access to the press or violating the First Amendment. I just don't think it. Anyway, so that's what we got for you this week. We're sitting here at 36 minutes. Good time to wrap it up. As always, people, questions, comments, concerns. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm right. Tell me I'm beautiful. Make me feel good. I don't know why you don't ever just compliment me. I have feelings, guys, okay? All you people out there, just know I have feelings. I'm a person. I have a feeling at least. I don't know. Anger is a feeling, right? So I have that at least going for me. But no, anything you want to say, leave it in the comments below. As always, we address it on the podcast next week. If you got something fun or interesting to say, or mean sometimes. Sometimes it's fun to read the trolls. You know how you guys are, you bunch of meanies out there. And I will catch you guys next Friday.